Tonight at 10, questions about Twitter's future direction as the world's richest man finally seals the deal. The billionaire Elon Musk has made a career out of grandiose business ventures. How will he shape his new acquisition?
Elon likes these profound challenges of humanity, like going to space or completely changing the carbon emission systems and transportation and energy. And now he's trying to fix, the problems in social media.
Donald Trump says that Twitter is now in sane hands, but a new committee will decide whether he'll be allowed back onto Twitter.
And we'll be asking whether Mr. Musk's belief in absolute free speech might lead to fewer restrictions on misinformation and abuse. Also on the programme. After months of political deadlock at Stormont, a snap election is called in Northern Ireland, but no date is given.
You have shown absolutely no remorse, and it appears that you are in complete denial.
A murder sentence is televised for the first time in England and Wales. Gemma Mitchell is given life for the killing and decapitation of her friend.
Come on over, baby. Whole lot of shaking going on. Hey.
And the rock and roll legend with a scandalous private life, Jerry Lee Lewis, dies at the age of 87.
Coming up at 10:30, hundreds of people in East London are forced to pay for their own emergency accommodation after losing power in their building 3 days ago.
Good evening. The social media platform Twitter is now in the hands of the world's richest person, with questions over whether its new owner will loosen regulations covering hate speech and misinformation. Elon Musk completed the takeover, which is worth more than £38 billion, and swiftly began making changes at the company. A number of top executives have reportedly been fired. On sealing the deal, Mr. Musk tweeted, "Let the good times roll." He has said previously that he believes in what he calls absolute free speech. And today, Donald Trump, who's banned from the platform, said Twitter was back in sane hands. But this evening, Elon Musk also announced the setting up of a new council with widely diverse viewpoints to moderate Twitter posts. This report is from our technology editor, Zoe Kleinman.
Elon Musk. To his many fans, one of the most innovative and influential people in the world. He's certainly the richest. He made his money with PayPal, and he's now the boss of the electric car firm Tesla. He also owns rocket maker SpaceX, and his Starlink satellite network provides internet access around the world. And now he adds to his portfolio Twitter, the small but mighty social network. Let that sink in, he said, walking into Twitter HQ, carrying, yes, a sink. Elon Musk is a prolific tweeter with more than 110 million followers. He's now calling himself Chief Twit. "The bird is freed," he tweeted, followed later by, "Let the good times roll." He's just promised to form a moderation council to oversee decisions about banned accounts and controversial content. Nothing will be decided before it meets, he said. It's not known when that will be. Musk has strong views about free speech.
If he starts to see that a certain type of free speech environment, e.g. one where anything goes, might become a hellscape, as he said, and that might see people leave, in which case advertisers who are paying to be on the site might get concerned because there'll be fewer eyeballs looking at their ads.
All of this matters because Twitter's become a place where world leaders, politicians and opinion formers go to share their views. It's kind of a direct line between the decision makers and us, those they represent. Elon Musk thinks we need a digital town square, a community space for public discussion. And Twitter, he argues, is it. Several top execs have already been sacked. And for those who remain, they need to know Musk means business.
I suspect they'll want to get some degree of certainty that Elon Musk isn't going to be running this like he runs his Twitter account. His Twitter account is full of memes and jokes. People want a degree of seriousness. They consider this a really important product in the world.
There's lots of speculation about whether Musk's takeover will mean the return of the most high-profile person on Twitter's banned list, former US President Donald Trump. One for the Moderation Council, but some investors are known to be keen.
To really be a truly free platform, I know everybody hates Donald Trump, including me, But free speech is about many things we don't like, and many of the things Trump might say might actually be really harmful to Trump. So I think this sort of fear of letting people on the platform is exactly why we need to protect speech.
Oh, great shot.
Speaking to Fox News, Donald Trump, of course, had his own view. He wished Elon Musk lots of luck, but said Twitter couldn't succeed without him. Zoe Kleinman, BBC News.
Well, our North America technology reporter James Clayton joins us now from outside Twitter's headquarters. And James, any indication of how Twitter might change now?
Yeah, well, he's tweeted saying that there's going to be a new council full of diverse voices, and they will decide whether Donald Trump is allowed back onto the platform. Now, that's very different to what Elon Musk said just a few months ago. He said that he would be allowed onto the platform. Now he's saying someone else is going to decide. It's all a little bit confusing. And I think what this really speaks to is Elon Musk knows that Twitter's revenue, in this place behind me, is almost entirely dependent on advertising dollars. And if adverts or advertisers don't want to put their ads next to hate speech and disinformation, he knows that. So he can say all of these things before he owns Twitter. But when he actually has decided that he's going to buy Twitter, he's now going to go, well, actually, I need to make money. I need to make sure investors are happy. So that's what we're seeing. So in the short term, I don't think you're going to see that much of a change. It is still possible that Donald Trump is allowed back, but people who are worried that Twitter was suddenly going to become a hellscape, everything we're hearing from Elon Musk at the moment would suggest that that's not going to be the case.
Thank you very much. James Clayton reporting there. The Northern Ireland Secretary has said that voters in Northern Ireland will be going to the polls for the second time in 12 months to vote yet again for members of the Stormont Assembly. After a midnight deadline to break months of gridlock passed, Chris Heaton-Harris said that an election must be held within 12 weeks, although he didn't give a date. In May, the nationalist party Sinn Féin for the first time won the biggest number of seats in the devolved parliament. But the largest unionist party, the DUP, refused to join the power-sharing executive, which means the government cannot function. The DUP believes that Northern Ireland's place in the UK is being undermined by the post-Brexit trade deal signed by Boris Johnson. That deal, known as the Protocol, sets out the trading arrangements between Great Britain and Northern Ireland. Goods being transported to Northern Ireland from the mainland are subject to checks. Our Ireland correspondent Emma Vardy reports.
Political paralysis on the horizon for some time has now drawn in. As the midnight deadline came and went, civil servants, not ministers anymore, are running Northern Ireland. Today, the Secretary of State said he would now call an election, but stalled for time on setting the date.
I have limited options ahead of me. I'm under a legal duty to call an election within 12 weeks. I've had lots and lots of talks with all the parties and will continue to do so.
Minister, there was the option to legislate to delay this moment. How does calling an election help solve any of the problems for Northern Ireland that got us here?
Nearly all the parties who've been saying this won't help the situation actually signed up to the rules that make this situation happen. Why call it now? Because I'm legally bound to do so.
He has the next 12 weeks to send people back to the ballot box. Alongside carol singers, voters are now expecting campaigning politicians on their doorstep in the run-up to Christmas. But beyond that, no one really thinks there's any greater prospect of power sharing coming back. The DUP maintains they will only go back into government if major changes are made to the Brexit arrangements.
I'm ready to fight an election. If the Secretary of State wants to hold an election, then he should tell us and we'll prepare for that election. But if not, then let's focus on what really needs to be done, which is to find a solution that restores Northern Ireland's place within the United Kingdom and removes the protocol and the harm it's doing to our relationship with the rest of the UK.
We need an Assembly and Executive up and running. We need to have one functioning to serve the people well, to get them through these tough times. But what we're all left this evening wondering what's going to happen next and what actually is the motivation behind what the Secretary of State have done this evening.
For many families, it means facing the cost of living crisis with political leaders absent. And not having a government means the ability to help communities through this is severely limited.
We are struggling from not even week to week, but day to day, trying to put food on our table.
James manages a community hub in Belfast, whose services he says families are increasingly dependent on, and that he's in the same boat.
I used to run a food hub from my house over COVID, and there is times that I'm having to go to a food programme and say, listen, we're really struggling.
Yourself?
Ourselves. And as a manager, it's humiliating.
Another election, he feels, provides no new answers.
I don't believe that the people here there really want Stormont to work.
And with patients facing the longest waiting lists in the UK, doctors are warning the health service is a major casualty of this crisis.
What will this winter look like for healthcare workers if there's no functioning government?
Yeah, we already know that it's really, really difficult. Even with the government, we just cannot cope with the demand that's there at the moment. 6 months ago, we should have had an executive. We should have had a budget, not only a budget, but a multi-year budget, which would have allowed us to do things vastly differently. And we would have seen those changes now. There's lots and lots of plans that are there.
The fragility of power sharing means Stormont has only functioned for 2 of the last 6 years. Today marks a return to a state of stagnation that there's little confidence an election can resolve. Previously, the Secretary of State had been crystal clear that he was going to call an election at 1 minute past midnight. Today, he looked like he wanted to buy a little more time. The fact remains the power to change the Northern Ireland Protocol doesn't lie here. That's dependent on negotiations between the British government and the EU. And the DUP will go into any election arguing that they have strong support from their voters for staying out of government until their demands are met. So we could end up on the other side of another polling day in the same place with no clearer idea of what happens next.
Emma, thank you. Emma Vardy reporting there. In a legal first, the sentencing of a murderer has been televised and broadcast live in England and Wales. An Old Bailey judge gave Gemma Mitchell life in prison with a minimum term of 34 years for killing her friend from church and then dumping her decapitated body in Devon. The judge described her as extremely devious. Helena Wilkinson reports.
This is Gemma Mitchell on her way to Mi Quen Chong's house. Hours later, she murders her and puts her body in the big blue suitcase. Miss Chong, also known as Deborah, was friends with the former osteopath. Both devout Christians, they met through the church, but they fell out over money. Mitchell is the first murderer and first woman in England and Wales to have her sentence televised in a rule change allowing people to see justice being delivered.
The enormity of your crime is profoundly shocking, even more so given your apparent religious devotion, as well as the fact that Deborah Chong was a good friend to you and had shown you great kindness.
Mitchell kept Miss Chong's body for 2 weeks. She then drove over 200 miles away to Salcombe in Devon. Charlotte Rawlings was with family on holiday when they found the headless body.
It was the body of a lady, and initially I thought maybe she slipped over, but then on closer look her hand was left on her skirt and it was so white you knew that she wasn't alive.
Mitchell became the prime suspect and was arrested.
All right, Gemma, at this moment I'm arresting you on suspicion of murder.
Today, in a victim impact statement read to court, Deborah Chong's sister, Amy Chong, said, "I can't begin to believe how we will begin to move on with our lives without Deborah in it. I hope justice is served. Gemma does not deserve my sympathy." Mitchell will serve at least 34 years in prison for what was a chilling and calculated murder of her friend. Helena Wilkinson, BBC News.
A man who broke into the California home of the US House Speaker Nancy Pelosi and attacked her husband is reported to have shouted, "Where's Nancy?" The politician was in Washington, D.C. at the time. A 42-year-old man has been charged with attempted murder. Paul Pelosi, who's 82, is being treated in hospital. While our North America editor, Sarah Smith, is in Washington for us tonight. Sarah.
This was a brutal assault, as police say that the intruder attacked Paul Pelosi with a hammer whilst he said he was looking for Nancy Pelosi. And it comes on the same day that US intelligence services are now warning of the rising threat that they see coming from violent political extremism in America.
Police say the intruder used a hammer to smash glass doors and break into the Pelosi home, shouting, "Where's Nancy?" This appears to be a targeted attack. He tried to tie up Paul Pelosi to wait for his wife to come home. She was in Washington at the time. Police arrived as the attack was happening.
Our officers observed Mr. Pelosi and the suspect both holding a hammer. The suspect pulled the hammer away from Mr. Pelosi and violently assaulted him with it.
House of Representatives and Mr. Paul Pelosi.
82-year-old Paul Pelosi is in hospital undergoing brain surgery. The suspect will be charged with attempted homicide.
Nancy! Oh, Nancy!
During the attack on the Capitol on January the 6th last year, rioters were specifically searching for Nancy Pelosi. She'd been evacuated from the building by police. Later, she blamed Donald Trump for inciting the riot and putting politicians in danger.
It shouldn't be that not only is the President of the United States inciting an insurrection, but keeps fanning the flame, endangering the security of members of Congress.
President Biden says he is praying for Mr. Pelosi's recovery. Republican leaders have also condemned the attack. Violent political threats and attacks have increased alarmingly in America in the last few years. Some senior politicians are now worried it won't be long before one of them is killed. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Washington.
COVID infections remain fairly stable across the UK, but other viruses such as flu and norovirus are increasing, according to the latest figures. Our medical editor Fergus Walsh explains more.
There are some encouraging signs that the current wave of COVID may be levelling off. The ONS estimates that 2 million people in the UK had the infection in the week to the 17th of October. That's unchanged from the previous week and represents around 1 in 30 people. But what matters is how many of those are getting seriously ill with COVID. The most up-to-date figures for hospital admissions are from England, and they show these are falling and are well below levels seen in previous Omicron waves. Plus, most patients in hospital with COVID will have been admitted with another condition. Now, that fall in COVID cases in hospitals is likely to be due in part to vaccinations. More than 10 million people have had their COVID booster, which increases immunity. In all, 26 million people are eligible. But there's also concern about flu. If we look at hospital admissions for flu in England, they were very low in the past 2 winters. The lines across the bottom there, because there was almost no flu circulating. This winter's flu season has started early and is already causing an impact. That small red line you can see there. Admission rates are highest among the under 5s. Now, in a bad winter like 2017, you can see that flu caused a big spike in admissions. So people are being urged to have their flu vaccine. 33 million are eligible. Now, every winter, of course, there are many viruses to contend with. As well as COVID and flu, there are increasing cases of RSV, respiratory syncytial virus, which can cause chest infections, especially in young children, and norovirus, which triggers vomiting and diarrhea. All of these have the potential to put added pressure on the NHS. Meanwhile, in China, dozens of cities, including Wuhan, where coronavirus was first recorded, have gone back into lockdown as the country pursues its zero COVID policy. Rita.
Fergus, thank you. Now, part of the job for politicians and prime ministers is regular photo opportunities. And Rishi Sunak chose Croydon University Hospital for his first outing as PM to talk about tackling the COVID backlog and supporting the NHS. But as he found, not everything can be controlled. Inpatient Catherine Poole, who's 77, took him to task over an issue of great importance to her.
How do you do, ma'am? I'm Rishi.
Yeah.
How's your day been?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. Did you come in this morning?
Mm-hmm.
No, you came
Monday.
Monday. And they've looked after you really nicely?
Yeah, they always do.
Yeah.
It's a pity you don't pay them more.
Well, we are trying.
No, you're not trying. You need to try harder.
Right, I will take that away. Yeah. No, well, they are a very nice team here, aren't they?
They are, but it's important because they do very hard work.
They do very good work, yeah. So
That's what you need to work on.
So that's what I'm going to be doing. Well, thank you for letting me know that. Nice to see you. I hope you get home.
Now, students could be forced to drop out of university if the shortage of housing in some cities isn't addressed, the National Union of Students has told the BBC. It says there's been a failure to plan for the bumper numbers getting places. Our education editor, Branwen Jeffries, reports.
Waiting all night until morning, students in Durham desperate for flats for next year. Student lets are limited in this historic city. But it's not just a problem in Durham. Across the Pennines, Melody is a final year student in Manchester, weeks into term, and she's still sofa surfing.
I literally don't have a place to live right now. Currently, I'm crashing with friends. It's probably like my only option because I'm just not able to find a place in Manchester at the moment.
What makes it so difficult to get a flat?
Because there's multiple people going for the same places. They said, can you pay 12 months now? And I was like, no, like I can't pay 12 months of rent now. Like I couldn't even ask that from my parents, if that makes sense.
There are record numbers of students. In several cities, not enough affordable housing.
Our advice service is flooded with kind of requests about housing, and providers for students are offering far fewer flats to rent this year compared to previous years, which is quite telling of the situation.
It's also about cost. Student maintenance loans have gone up a little bit this year, but nowhere near the cost of living. And for most students, their biggest bill is rent. This busy lettings agency now only has more expensive flats aimed at the young professional market.
Now there's not the availability. If they're for this year, if they're coming in for the next years, then yeah, we've got the properties on the market for them, but right now we've got nothing for students for this year.
The rising cost of living is students' biggest concern, and housing is part of that. Scotland may extend a freeze on rents. In England, the National Union of Students wants action.
The universities really need to take a look at their huge focus on increasing student intake. It's going up exponentially, and the fact is that there's just not enough accommodation provided for students.
It's not easy to find quick fixes for housing problems, which could leave some students struggling next year too. Branwen Jeffries, BBC News, Manchester.
As winter approaches and worries about energy costs rise, two communities in the West Highlands of Scotland are having very different experiences of the cost of living crisis. In one, energy bills are well above the UK average, while in the other, a hydroelectric scheme has led to no increase at all. As part of our series looking at how energy costs are affecting different regions, our Scotland editor James Cook has visited Glenelg and Knoydart.
Winter is coming, and in the Highlands, they're worried. Energy bills here are way above the UK average and rising.
Life in rural Scotland does bring great rewards. Just look at the scenery for a start. But it also comes with great challenges, and many people here will tell you those challenges are now intensifying.
This community ferry hops to and fro between Glenelg on the mainland and the Isle of Skye. But the cost of diesel to run it has jumped 70% in the past year.
How difficult is that as a business?
Well, it is difficult because we always run on really quite tight margins here, and we're still expected as a social enterprise business to meet rising costs with very small profit margins. It does make me really nervous as to how we might be able to continue in the way that we are.
At the heart of Glenelg village is the hall, but it's not cheap to maintain, especially when the electricity bill has soared from £800 a quarter to more than £4,000.
There's a church group, there's indoor bowls, indoor football, kids youth club. They're going to have to look, can we run our club, can we not run our club? So if we increase our prices, there's no way that we can run the hall at the costs that are currently given.
All right, Rona.
In the Glenelg Inn, energy is not the only worry. Brexit and a lack of affordable housing have made staff hard to find, and inflation is pushing up the price of supplies.
I really love this business, but it is becoming much more challenging for me. I'm a bit scared about going into next year. I'm scared about the staffing issue, the prices, the power prices, obviously.
Sail south, though, and it's a brighter picture. This is the Knoydart Peninsula, accessible only by boat or a 2-day hike. That means it's not on the national grid. Power here comes from this hydro scheme, run by a community project called Knoydart Renewables.
If it wasn't for Knoydart Renewables, the population, which is about now 120, with all the businesses which are paying all the taxes they're paying, wouldn't be sustainable economically. We'd probably have 20 or 30 people living here with tumbleweed blowing down the streets.
And you're effectively insulated from this energy emergency that everyone else is facing.
The energy emergency has no effect on us in terms of our electricity production.
In the local brewery, they see the hydro as a blessing.
We're not going to be receiving the same price hikes that grid-based consumers are.
So for you, how important is this hydro scheme to keep you going?
It's critical, really is. So we know we'll be able to keep the lights on and keep the beer coming.
And that sense of confidence is shared throughout this community.
There's more people here, there's more new businesses, there's triple the amount of kids in the school than there was when I was there, and there's room for development. So I'm building a house right now, and it means that I know that I will be able to have power, which is obviously very important.
Optimism, yes, but it's confined to this rare corner of the country without an energy crisis. James Cook, BBC News, Knoydart.
The rock and roll legend Jerry Lee Lewis has died at the age of 87. Famous for his flamboyant showmanship, his songs included Whole Lot of Shaking Going On and Great Balls of Fire. He was one of the pioneers who created rock and roll in 1950s America. But his career was also marked by scandal, addiction and violence. David Silito looks back at his eventful life.
Come on over, baby. Whole lot of shaking going on.
If you ever wondered why rock and roll was called the devil's music, Jerry Lee Lewis is your answer. It was his piano playing that got him expelled from Bible college. Rock and roll was his escape from God-fearing southern poverty.
If you want to be an ass-dragging hillbilly singer, you can be one if you want to. But I would hate to put myself in that position. I'm rock and roll.
His family had mortgaged their house to buy young Jerry a piano. He started out performing on the back of a truck before hitting the big time as part of Sun Records' roster of rock and roll stars. And then it all came crashing down.
Come on, baby. Crazy.
Were you there, Mrs. Lewis?
I was there, but I wasn't at the show.
On tour in Britain, he introduced his new wife, Myra Gale, his 13-year-old cousin. There was outrage, but he continued to perform.
When were you married? Well, we leave our personal questions out of this, sir.
Come on over, baby. Jerry's got the bull by the horn. Yeah, and I ain't faking. I got the whole lot of shaking going on.
His life? There were 7 marriages, was a barely believable catalogue of death, drugs, violence, guns and burning Cadillacs.
Shake it, I do shake, baby shake. Come on over.
I preached pretty heavy. And I said, man, I really can't be what I am and live up to what I'm doing. There's too many good-looking women out there, you know. So, I mean, I had to do my rock and roll thing, and I'm still doing it. What's your problem?
His roots were God and gospel, but after a life like this, he probably had a good idea where he was going.
Jerry Lee Lewis, who's died at the age of 87. Time now for a look at the weather. Here is Nick Miller. Nick.
It's all about the weekend, of course, and really it is a case of more of the same this weekend. Largely fine end to the day today, and there will be spells of fine weather at times this weekend. There will also be rain at times. It'll be blustery. It'll be mild. In fact, it'll feel quite warm when you get to see some sunshine. We have low pressure still to the west of us. Around that, the mild air coming our way. Also bands of wet weather, and there's another one about to show its hand across southwest England over the next few hours and lift northwards through the night across more of England and into Wales by morning. North of all of that, a lot of dry weather. Some heavy showers in northern Scotland slowly fading away. And it's a bit cooler tonight. Some spots dipping into single figures. 8 degrees in Norwich in the morning, would you believe? We start with rain in Wales and across parts of England tomorrow. And that through the day moves north in the morning into northern England, Northern Ireland, southern Scotland. Slowly feeding further north across Scotland during the day, but not into northern Scotland until the evening. Behind it, some heavy showers, though, for East Anglia and South East England. A largely fine afternoon, hazy sunshine and warmth. 22, it's 19 in Cardiff, 18 degrees in Hull. Saturday evening, the rain does reach northern Scotland. Some showers feed further east across England. More showers reach into western areas by Sunday morning. And then on Sunday, some uncertainty about how extensive any rain will be for a time in East Anglia and the southeast. It does look like a cloudier, cooler day. Elsewhere, there are sunny spells. There are bands of heavy showers moving eastwards. Some are thundery with hail, gusty winds, and overall Sunday is looking like a windier day. I need to fulfil my contractual obligation as a weather presenter to remind you that the clocks go back on Saturday night, 1 hour to mark the end of British summertime, which has nothing to do with the weather, everything to do with an extra hour in bed. Unless you're a night worker, let's not dwell on that. Next week, more of the same when it comes to wind and rain. Temperatures heading down. It will actually begin to feel like we're into November. Rita.
Glad you respect your contract. And that is BBC News at 10. There's more analysis of the day's main stories on Newsnight with Katie Razzle, which is just getting underway on BBC Two. The news continues, though, on BBC One, as now it's time to join our colleagues across the nations and regions for the news where you are. From the 10 o'clock team, it's good night.